Socialism won't make you rich, but what does? Welcome to Sharpening Arrows, where we train teens to think biblically about life and politics. I'm your host, Victor Jakes. Welcome to those of you who are new, especially if you are joining us after listening to the Veritas Vox podcast. Really enjoyed being on that show. The title of our podcast, Sharpening Arrows, is a reference to a couple of wonderful Bible verses, Proverbs 27:17, as iron sharpens iron, so one man sharpens another. And then arrows, that's a reference to Psalms 127:4. Like arrows in the hands of a warrior are sons born in one's youth. Blessed is the man whose quiver is full of them. And of course, we know sons means both sons and daughters in that context. And as parents, we want our children to be sent out, but we don't want you to be sent out dull. We want you to be sent out sharp and ready for what the world is going to throw at you. And one of the things that the world is throwing at you right now is socialism, which we have spent the last couple of episodes discussing, and we're going to wrap that discussion up today. Now, if you want to watch me instead of just listen to me, we are on YouTube, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows, youtube.com/@sharpening-arrows. All right. In the last couple of episodes, we've talked about this idea of wealth inequality and looked at this quote from Senator Bernie Sanders, which he said a couple of weeks ago. We're living in the richest country in the history of the world, right? All right. You tell me why we're the only nation not to guarantee health care to all people, the only nation not to guarantee paid family and medical leave, why we have a $7.25 an hour minimum wage, why we have 800,000 people sleeping out on the street. There's a lot in there. But 2 episodes ago, we made the case for wealth redistribution and pointed out its flaws. And then I realized the episode was going to go extremely long, so we didn't get into the second part of that, which is the case for capitalism, the case for freedom, for free market. But in that episode, we looked at the foundational issue of what is normal, poverty or wealth. Because before you have a discussion about socialism or capitalism or any economic system, you need to come to an understanding of this foundational idea. What is the state of nature? Before anything else, what is there? Is there poverty or is there wealth? And I looked at why the state of nature is poverty. And so that left unanswered this question of where did this wealth come from? In this last episode, we looked at question 2 of the Great Eight. Has this been tried before? And we looked at just one example of the failure of socialism around the world. But we haven't yet answered this question. Since poverty is normal, why are we rich? Why is our country rich? And I want to have our first pause point right there. Remember, I encourage parents to listen with your teenagers or teenager. Share the AirPod, put it on the speaker, and then stop and discuss these questions, because parents, you are your teenager's most important teacher, and we want teenagers to really think through these issues. Teenagers, you can't just take mom and dad's views by osmosis. You have to work through these issues. You have to think about these issues. You have to see the appeal of the other side's arguments, and you have to decide what you actually believe. And parents, I'd encourage you to let your teenagers do this, even if it means at points they disagree with you or they disagree with me. They're going to come to their own conclusions eventually. Let's let them do it in our home, where we can point out and push back and work through some of these issues. So our first pause point question: since poverty isn't normal, why are we rich? Take a moment and talk about why that might be. Now, there are 2 ways to look at this. If you remember question 5 of the Great Eight, what do you mean by that? What do you mean by rich? You could say rich as a country, which is certainly true. Or you could talk about why people as individuals are rich and why we have so many people in the United States who are rich. There are similar arguments for both of these things, so there is some overlap, but I want to focus mostly on individuals. Why are there rich individuals in the United States? And as always, we're going to start with arguments for the wrong side, the side that I personally disagree with. We'll refute those arguments and then make the argument that is correct. Number one. So again, this is arguments for the wrong side. People in the United States are rich because they exploit. They take advantage of other people. Now, this is sort of implicit in Bernie's statement. The rich have, the poor don't. It's not stealing. We're just making things more equal. And if you wanted to expand this out on a nation level, this would be the argument about colonialism. But that's the first argument. They have done these things. They've taken advantage of people, and they shouldn't have done that. And the government's just going to come in, and the government's going to even things out. Argument number two: people who are rich are simply luckier. They were born rich. They got into a good school. They got the job. Other people didn't. They got the right skin color. They had privilege. You see, being rich isn't something you can really control. It just happens to certain people and not others. And oftentimes it's something beyond that person's control. So it's not fair that luck should make some people rich and some people not. We need the government to come in and even the playing field. Think about this. You know people from good families whose parents sent them to good schools. They had all the advantages. That's why they have higher scores on the SAT. And there needs to be someone to come in and do something about it. So let's have a pause point. Do you think luck, which we will define as events outside someone's control, play a factor in success? All right, argument number three well, this is more about why people are rich. Argument number three: well, they have the money, and so if we want more people to be rich, we need to give them money. And no one is better at giving people money than the government. If we just gave people money, we took from the very top, the 1%, and we redistributed down to the bottom 50%, they would have more money. They would be rich, or at least middle class. It's right there in the definition. Why aren't people rich? Well, they don't have money. If we give them money, they will be rich, or at least be able to afford the basic necessities. Let's have another pause point. Does giving people money make them rich? What do you think? As you discuss it, let me tell you about Mama Bear Prayers, a podcast for moms who are knee-deep in dishes and training their teens. Whether you are in the carpool lane or the coffee line, host Charity Rios wants to come alongside you and help you grow deeper in your relationship with Jesus. Now, as every parent knows, raising kids can feel a bit like a ping pong game. You bounce from moments of joy to moments of deepest concern. Combined with the busyness of life, this back and forth can leave you feeling overwhelmed and even isolated. And Charity knows this because she's the mom of 4 very busy boys. There's a lot going on. And it's why she created Mama Bear Prayers, to come alongside and encourage moms who are on the journey of raising kids. God works through prayer, so check out Mama Bear Prayers today. All right, let's look at these arguments because I think they're important to talk through. And one of the reasons that I think is important to talk through is there is an element of truth in each of them, but it's not the full story. And this is very often what kind of divides the left and the right on issues. Is on the surface, the leftist answer seems appealing, even obvious, but if you go beyond it, that there's usually a problem that's created in the long term. All right, so this first argument is that people are rich because they exploit other people. And I want to start out by saying that this can happen when the government gets involved. If the government tells people you have to buy this product, the person selling that product can get rich, not because they've made other people's lives better, but because the government mandated it. We see this with things like solar and wind power. The government, over the course of decades, the federal government, state governments, have given a lot of advantages, a lot of tax dollars to solar and wind power. And so if you were involved in solar and wind projects 20 years ago, that company, if they've made it, is probably very rich. Not because they produce a better product. Solar and wind power are very unreliable, which is not a great thing when you're talking about electricity. But you need to notice that this is cronyism, not capitalism. Capitalism is when there's a free exchange of goods. So we're not supporting cronyism. We're not supporting the government coming in and saying, you have to buy this. And if someone becomes rich because of that, that's not great. That is, not what you would typically hear defined as exploitation, but certainly the government taking advantage of people. And just as a broader point, aside from this cronyism, the idea that robbing poor people will make you rich doesn't actually make a lot of sense. The reason that thieves target rich people is that that's where all the money is. And so this idea that, well, rich people are rich because they stole from the poor people, it doesn't really make sense because the poor people are poor. That's not where the money is. But the bigger response to this is that exploitation can't explain why poor people today have better stuff than the billionaires of 100 years ago. I'm going to say that again. Poor people in America today have better stuff than the billionaires of 100 years ago. Think about John Rockefeller, who lived from 1839 to 1937. He was a billionaire. He founded the Standard Oil Company and became one of the richest men in American history. When he died, his fortune was worth over $1 billion, which would be more than $25 billion in today's dollars. Now, he had more money than you and me, but we have better stuff. How many lights did you turn on today? Thomas Edison didn't patent the incandescent light bulb until Rockefeller was in his 40s. There wasn't an electrical grid, so small generators powered the first light bulbs. Today, electricity is an afterthought. We're concerned when the lights go out. Now, we made it through the summer, which in Las Vegas here is actually quite an accomplishment. And we needed air conditioning to make it through the summer. Tough luck for Rockefeller. Willis Carrier didn't invent air conditioning until 1902. The first public building to have air conditioning was Rivoli Theater in Times Square in 1925. Rockefeller was in his 80s. In the 1940 Packard was the first car to offer factory-installed air conditioning, but Rockefeller had died in 1937. Americans today are glued to their screens. They watch an average of 35 hours of television a week, but Rockefeller wasn't. The first commercially produced TV didn't come out until the year after his death. For most of Rockefeller's life, you went to the butcher for meat, the baker for bread, and a vegetable stand for produce. The general store was small, cramped, and dimly lit. Now, I'm sure Rockefeller had someone else doing his shopping, but you and I have access to more things than he did. Today, the average grocery store has around 44,000 items. 44,000 items in a grocery store that we drive past every single day. Oh, and if that's not enough, Amazon has 400 million items available for doorstep delivery. Rockefeller didn't have that. Even for $1 billion, Rockefeller couldn't have bought an iPhone or a computer or accessed the internet. The $500 phone sitting in your parents' pocket contains instant access to more information than Rockefeller saw in his lifetime. In 1900, the average life expectancy was 47. Today, it's almost 79. And one big reason for that is that childbirth is much safer today, both for moms and babies. In 1900, almost 10% of children died in childbirth or within a year of being born. For every 1,000 births, 6 to 9 women died of complications. Today, the infant mortality rate has plummeted to just 0.7%, and a mother's risk of dying while giving birth has dropped 99%. There's so much more. The car you have, the medical care you have access to, your refrigerator and ability to travel, all surpass what Rockefeller had. It's incredible, but it wasn't inevitable. Now hold that thought while we debunk a couple more arguments about wealth. Remember the second argument. People who are rich are just luckier. They were born rich. They got into the good school. They had privilege. Government needs to come in and even the playing field. Okay, now go back to that question, which I hope you discussed. Do you think luck, events outside someone's control, play a factor in their success? Now, first, as Christians, we know that God opens and closes doors. That's absolutely the case. And second, we do need to acknowledge that factors outside of person's control matter. Kids can't determine if they have a married mom or dad. But statistically, a child with a married mom and dad will do much better in life. Kids can't pick their elementary school. Now, those things do matter, but they aren't enough. The website Finance Band says, according to the third generation rule, 70% of affluent families will have lost their wealth by the third generation. This economic adage addresses the longevity of multi-generational wealth. This economic adage addressing the longevity of multi-generational wealth has been well studied across cultures and professions. Why? Because your choices matter. In a free country, which we have here today, your choices are the biggest determining factor in your success in life. Now, I will grant you that you can make all the right choices and you may not end up a billionaire, but if you make good, consistent choices over time, you definitely can end up as a millionaire. Just check out the power of compound interest. And I want to talk a little bit more about this idea of luck, of factors beyond your control. Because it is true that factors beyond your control matter, and they don't just matter in childhood. Say you have a 25% chance of landing a great job. You don't get it. You didn't get lucky. But now you have a choice. Do you quit or do you work harder? Well, if you work harder, the next time an opportunity like that comes up, say you have a 50% chance. You still don't get it. Well, you now have a choice. Do you quit or do you work harder? You work harder, and now you have a 75% chance. And so on until you get the opportunity. So when you look at a specific outcome, you can say that individual outcome is luck, or more accurately, God opening a door. But here's the key. Successful people don't quit until they've been, quote unquote, lucky. Do you see that? When a successful person is unlucky, they don't quit. They don't stop believing in God. They don't turn away from all the beliefs. They just keep working until they get this opportunity that everyone will look back later and say, "Oh, that's just lucky." Well, they've made their own luck by continuing to work hard. In college, I was once in a speech tournament hosted by a gentleman who had done very well financially in life, and I didn't end up winning. I was a little bummed, and I was talking to him, and I talked to him for a few minutes, and he said, "Oh, you're going to make it." And I thought, are you kidding me? That is so easy for you to say. You've already made it. I haven't made it. I'm just a college student. And I want to say a few months ago, I was talking to a high school student, and I told her basically, you're going to make it. And the reason I said that, and when I learned, 20 years after having this conversation with this gentleman, is what you see in people is you see that drive. You see, oh, you're not going to quit when things get hard. Oh, you get knocked down, you're going to pick yourself back up, and you're going to keep going until you get lucky. But it's not lucky, right? It's taking advantage of the opportunities. All right, and then there's this third argument, which is giving people money is what makes them rich. It's true by definition. Okay, and that's true in one sense. If you give someone $1 million, they will be a millionaire. And then we go to question 1 of the Great Eight. What happens next? Because you see, if you don't have the right habits, it literally doesn't matter how much money you have. You will end up poor. You might have heard about the gambling scandal that rocked the National Basketball Association last week. It's from USA Today. Miami Heat guard Terry Rozier was arrested on October 23rd following an FBI investigation into an NBA gambling scandal. And obviously, he's innocent until proven guilty. But let's have a pause point. How much do you think Rozier has earned in his NBA career? Maybe he's only earning $1 million a year. Yeah, that's a lot of money to you and me, but you take out taxes, you consider all the travel and the trainers, and you could see how someone would just run into financial problems and they have to turn to illegal gambling. Actually, Rozier has racked up $160 million in career earnings, according to SpotRack. He's received contracts worth $96.3 million, $56.7 million, and $8.8 million during his 10-year career. And yet he's wrapped up in this scandal. You can't earn your way out of bad money habits. You can't earn your way out of bad decisions. You need to take responsibility for yourself. All right, so let's get to the argument for the correct side on why the U.S. is rich, why individuals in the U.S. are rich. Why are you and I? Why do we have access to better stuff than John Rockefeller, a billionaire, just 100 years ago? It's because the free market creates wealth for individuals and raises the standard of living for everyone in the society. Remember this question: what is normal, poverty or wealth? We've already talked about that poverty is normal. And now we're looking for why we have so much wealth. Why we have so many material possessions that people throughout the course of human history couldn't even have dreamed of. Now, it wasn't because of government agencies and central planners and socialism. They didn't coordinate this dramatic improvement in human well-being. Instead, millions of individuals tried to make themselves better off by providing a superior good or service. Now, see this. They're working to benefit themselves. Because the United States has a relatively free economy, businessmen and women couldn't force their customers to buy. Do you see that? They're doing this to help to better themselves, but because they can't force their customers to buy their product, they have to create something of value, something that benefits both parties. Now, these mutually beneficial transactions, which are the calling card of free market capitalism, create value, and not just for the two people involved in the transaction. They've created so much value that you have a better standard of living than the richest man in America had just 80 years ago. I'm going to say that again because it's so incredible. Free market capitalism, the entrepreneurs working in that system have created so much value that you and I have a better standard of living than the richest man in America just 80 years ago. And this is why the left's attacks on the 1% or Bernie's attacks on the rich are so misguided. Aside from those profiting via government coercion, the crony capitalism we talked about, but in the free market, the rich are rich because of how much they've improved the lives of others. Just by living in 21st century America, you are the 1%. You have it better than 99% of the people who've ever lived on planet Earth. Thank previous generations for rejecting the siren song of socialism and embracing capitalism and freedom. Poor John Rockefeller never had it as good as you do now. If you enjoyed this podcast, subscribe on YouTube, leave us a 5-star review, and share it with a friend. Be courageous like Charlie, stay sharp, and give God the glory. I'll see you next time.